Okay.
Okay.
So I have just about 6 o'clock.
Oh boy, you see, it's my mic on here.
Who is Jay Slim? Is that Johnny?
It's Johnny, yes.
Okay, Johnny, were you able to get on? Were you able to submit that number 4?
Well, what I did, I kind of like just ad-libbed it because I couldn't read the document. I didn't see the document at all. And so I kind of like just, I tried to participate some type of way.
Okay.
So it's probably all over the place. I don't know.
But you submitted something?
Yeah, I did submit something. So I think that's better than just not submitting anything at all.
Now, did anyone else have problem? That was number 4, right?
Yes,
that
ma'am.
Was discussion 4 or media 4?
Yes, it was media 4, I believe. It was the one that went, no. It was the discussion number 4. Because
Okay.
what we had to take a look see at a what I understand it was a email document or something like that.
Okay.
And that's what I gathered from
Polly Penner?
Yes, it was a Polly, yes.
Oh. Okay. Go ahead, Pandora.
Johnny, by chance, when you sign in and log on to the school, are you checking the box that says advise me before you go to another site? Because I had done that previously and I was unable to access the extra materials too until I stopped checking the box.
No, I really didn't pay that any attention, and then I don't know. I think I pretty much learned how to navigate the portal, and I was thinking that maybe I was moving too fast and it hadn't been uploaded yet, and then I did submit I did talk. Well, I didn't talk to somebody. I left a message for someone because of the time differences and stuff.
With Ryan?
I
or
think
Matt?
I left a message
Okay.
on someone's. I'm not exactly sure who.
Okay. Well, try that. What Pandora suggested, perhaps that's it, because I was able to go right to the document, and I was getting posts from everyone else, so I'm not sure what's going on. So you might want to check your settings or make sure that you're signed into the Trinity account.
Oh yeah.
Sometimes you guys sign into from other email accounts.
No, I always go straight to the Trinity portal and go through the Moodle.
Okay.
And I'm actually I'm getting ready to go into try to pull that out now and see what it gives me. So that was doing Unit 4, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, this is not the time to be experiencing something like this.
Okay. Well, we'll work through that. Okay. So what I do want to do is probably share my screen with the PowerPoints. Does anyone have any general questions? Because that's pretty much what I am going to go over questions at the beginning that you might have. Let's see.
Okay. No, I still don't see anything on this document.
Okay.
A question for the assignment this week. There was a phrase where it says not subject to correction. I'm not familiar with that. So is it really just what it sounds like?
You're asking me what, Pandora?
There was a phrase in the assignment for this week. It says the is not subject to correction, and I'm not familiar with that.
I don't know where you have that. Where do you see that? And
It's
what is
on the case for Lax versus Cahill,
Mm-hmm.
second paragraph.
Okay, I'll have to look on my desktop.
Just couldn't find reference to that.
Where is that?
That was 4 or 5. That's number 4. I mean 5. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Is it in the case? Are you speaking of the actual Pandora? Hello?
There you are.
There you are.
Yeah, no, I'm here. Could you not hear me?
No.
I'll hear you.
Okay, I was asking you if you were speaking of the opinion in Lax v. Cahill.
Opinion. That is the word.
Okay. Email me your specific question. I'll look at it. Okay.
Okay.
Let's do that. I did want to go through the slides and okay. So I had a couple of housekeeping matters. Can you all see my PowerPoint?
Yes.
ma'am.
Okay.
Oh, that's
So the final exam, I tried to update it to a different, it's based on the Bible, but it looks like it's still the Samuel versus discussing Saul and the contract for Saul as a king. Did you guys review that already for the final?
No.
No.
I looked at it, but
Margarita or somebody said that they're looking at it.
Briefly, I kind of looked at it briefly, and someone else said that too. Yeah.
yes.
Okay, because I was trying to make it a little simpler as far as the context and what you're reading, because there's a lot of reading between Genesis 8 and 15. And so if no one has started on the final exam, I will discuss with Trinity if they can update it to my new final. You still have to answer the question from each chapter. It'll still be the same format. For example, has a deal been made? Okay, and then that goes over offer, acceptance, mutual assent. Okay, you will still need to apply those contract principles and answer the question. It's just a matter of if I use King Saul from the Bible or Jacob and Rachel, because there's a contract for his employment.
Oh yeah.
For her. So if it's not too late, because I was looking to see if anyone had worked on it, and I don't want to throw anybody off. I know it's in 2 weeks.
Mhm.
Somebody's beeping. So at any rate, I will discuss with Matt if I can update it. If not, it's still a good final as it relates to King Saul and the Israelites wanting a king. And so there's a lot of contract principles within the agreement. And so, you know, if I'm not able to update it, we'll just go with that. Otherwise, it'll be based on Jacob and Rachel and Leah.
And when
Okay.
will we know this?
Monday.
Okay.
Monday or Tuesday, whenever they get back to me. So I'll email them tomorrow, and hopefully they'll get back to me, and then I'll let you know. But it's the
Okay.
same thing. So you'll answer like the second one, has a deal been made? Are there defenses to enforcement of the deal? And so you apply those contract principles. And so you'll still do that same thing. That does not change. But I just didn't want if anyone had invested time in the final exam, then I wouldn't change it.
Okay.
All right.
So it's
And-
similar to. I'm
Hmm?
sorry. So it's similar to what you have posted concerning King Saul. It's similar to that, but it's
Yes.
more detailed because
Yeah,
it's only like 3 pages on that one.
Yeah, but no, the reading is very detailed because you're reading chapters 8 through 15 of Genesis.
Okay.
Ooh.
The
Okay.
new reading, if I'm able to change it, is less reading for you, but it's a little more simpler text. But I really want you to really apply the contract principles by making it simpler, what you have to read. And so that's kind of what I was thinking.
Okay.
Okay, that you have simpler reading, but I really would want you to delve into the contract principles as opposed to having a lot of stuff to read and not really knowing where to focus.
Makes sense.
And I think that last semester, a couple of people got it, but most of the class was all over the place. And so,
Wow.
and so I would rather you really understand the contract principles and apply them. And so I'll work on that, getting that updated. And if not, you will find out from me. And then on the discussion post word count, I think that I had changed it. I had reduced the number of words. And so sometimes, it's kind of late, but sometimes your posts are fewer words than they probably should be. And I think it's because you're trying to get it within those word counts. Are you guys having that issue?
Yes.
Okay. Because I'd rather you be more thorough than to just try to get the words. And at the time, I thought that was a lot of words when I was developing the class. And so, but now I know better that, your word count should be increased. So if you have, so in other words, I just want you to be thorough in your answers and irrespective of the word count. Any questions? You guys are quiet tonight. Yes, it's late for you, huh?
Yeah, I've been up since 2 o'clock this morning.
I'm sorry. Okay, so in your grades, I've been trying to keep up with your grading. I think I need to grade week 4. And so I'll work on that also and try to get week 4 and 5 together so that you know where you stand in the class. And just continue to email me if you have problems. If it's a technical thing, always try to contact Ryan first. And I've been trying to really check that email, the Trinity email, but it's not my main email, so sometimes I fall a little behind. So
same here.
Yeah, so if I apologize if I've gotten to some of you late, and if that's the case and something is due, I'm happy to give you a little more time just because of my tardiness. But at any rate, just communicate with me.
Yes, ma'am.
And we'll work through it. But yeah, the grade should be up to date except for, I haven't graded 4. So I'm gonna work on 4 and 5, probably together. And then the quizzes are just the quizzes. Whatever you get on the quizzes, yeah, that's what you get. I have no control over that one, other than the questions.
They can be tricky too. Those are tricky questions, so.
Well, I took them directly from the book. They should be questions based on your reading assignments. And so, it's kind of to make sure that you're reading the content. And so maybe rereading if you have to reread for understanding. And then, some of you have emailed me, especially on parole evidence. That's one of those concepts that's a little bit difficult even for law students to grasp.
Yes.
And so I got emails from some of you. So always do that.
I think sometimes, like with me, it's just knowing that I'm being timed.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just knowing that I'm being timed, and I just I don't know.
And it times out, right? I understand that it times out after a while. So
yeah,
I could just have them reset it. I can't reset it, but I can request that they reset it for you
interesting.
if you need that. But just know that I'm taking it, especially from the main topics or principles within the book. I take most of the questions come directly from the text of the book.
Mm-hmm.
And Professor, I'm glad you mentioned about the parole evidence because I had a hard time. I mean, I've read it so many times.
It changes every
I thought
time.
I was like, am I missing something? I understand what it's saying, but I'm not understanding how to put it together. It was just, I don't know. I don't know if confusing is the word, but it's just so a little complicated. Try to apply it, and I just had a hard time with it.
Right. So parole evidence.
Okay.
Let's see, I think I was going over. That's kind of like the Polly Penner, but the introductory paragraph. But all right. So parole evidence. Basically, all it's saying is that if there is a writing that evidences the contract between the parties, okay, you cannot contradict what the written terms of the contract says by bringing in additional evidence, outside evidence.
Mm-hmm.
For example, if you have pre-contract negotiations and you think that something is supposed to be in the contract, okay? If you sign that contract and you don't make sure that those things are in the contract, then you can't later say, oh, well, we negotiated this and this was supposed to be in the contract. Okay, you've had the opportunity to review it and sign it. So you can't later say, we had this negotiation and this was part of the contract if it's not in the writing. It cannot contradict your oral statements, cannot contradict what that writing says.
Okay.
So that was the problem with Polly Penner, right? She got the contract. She wanted to have ownership of what was rejected by the studios, right? That was what was in her email. But what did she do that was wrong?
Sign the contract.
She signed the contract right away. I'm signing the contract right away, right? So they never had the opportunity to even put that in the writing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so she can't come in and now present evidence that of this email that she wrote back to them and say, well, this was supposed to be in the contract. Okay, they never had the opportunity to even agree to it. And it may have been something that they discussed in their meeting when they had the meeting, or she had her interview with the studio executives. It may have been something that they discussed, but once again, it wasn't in the contract. It wasn't in the written contract. So she can't now present evidence to contradict that writing. She lost her opportunity to do that by taking it and signing it once again. She should have at least sent the email and say, well, I'll sign this when you add these terms to the contract.
Mm-hmm.
And since she didn't, then she can't later say that that was part of the contract. So that's basically what the parole evidence rule says. You cannot bring in extraneous evidence or oral statements that contradict what is in the writing. Does that help or make it a little more palatable?
So if it's a separate term,
It sounds better when you explain it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because,
Go ahead.
it's like I know with myself anyway, I'm kind of like left up to my own demise and stuff, I mean, I do other research and stuff, but I'm kind of like still left up to my own understanding of it a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that can be out there.
Well, you have to email me
Yes,
so I
ma'am.
can hopefully clarify.
Yes, ma'am.
Go ahead, Pandora, and then I'll get you, Tina.
so if it's a term then that is not specifically addressed in the contract,
Mm-hmm.
and someone brings it up saying that was supposed to be in, then you could have a case because it is not integrated in that contract?
There's no case. It's just not part of the contract. You
So
can't
you-
bring in evidence and say, this was part of the contract.
Okay, then I completely misunderstood the example about the recording the deed just because, which he was supposed to hold until the other guy defaulted. Their agreement was do not record this until I default. He recorded it, and it was an instrument contract standing on its own.
I'm not sure what you're talking about.
The
I
discussion
think she's
or the meeting?
Along with, what was it, Epstein and Pomeroff?
Mm-hmm. You're speaking of something in Epstein
Yes.
and the recording?
Yeah, they were, one was giving the other a loan and
Okay.
used a deed for property as collateral. It said,
Okay.
do not record this deed until unless I default.
Mm-hmm.
And
Oh,
the
okay.
deed was recorded
That's
anyway.
right.
So I'm wondering why, that's the one that really confused me. And the deed was not supposed to be recorded and the other guy won. So that's like the flip side of the argument.
Right.
I'm guessing.
Right.
I will have to look at that specific example
It's in the
because that
book.
might be sounds like a condition that should have occurred or didn't occur, and so he reneged on his condition that or his promise that he wouldn't record it,
Right.
and so I would have to look at the specific context because I don't remember that right off.
Because I viewed their agreement to not record it until the default as something outside of the contract of the deed being recorded. And
Now,
maybe
was that in the contract or no?
It was
well, they
not
didn't
written.
have a written contract for the loan, I don't
Mhm.
believe. Their understanding was if I default, you record this. But then it was probably a separate agreement for the document of the deed to be recorded, which was
Right,
whole-
now, so if the agreement was oral, then it wouldn't apply. The parole evidence applies when there's a writing. So I don't know what the court's reasoning was for allowing the other guy to
Yeah,
win.
that's what confused me too. Okay.
It was
I'll
the
look at that.
exception to the parole evidence rule.
Who's speaking?
Yvonne,
Okay. So you would-
page 66, 67.
Very good.
Okay. So review that, and then if you have questions, then you can send the questions to me. But typically, generally, that is what, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I thought I had muted you. Typically, that's what the parole evidence rule stands for. And so you should put those things in writing. And if your writing doesn't include it, it's not in the contract. Okay, you have to make sure that you do that. So that's the whole point of it, because we always have our pre-contract negotiations. We're talking about something, and then you could go through a lot of different conversations, right, about contract and the terms and who's going to do what and what are the conditions, right?
Mhm.
So the writing is supposed to be evidence of your ultimate agreement, right? So all that extra stuff that you may have talked about, if it's not in the writing, you can't bring that in to contradict the writing because the writing is the contract in that case. Now, compare that to if there's a term that you don't really understand, like something that's vague in the contract. Now, you can bring evidence in to clarify vague terms. And so when you do that, you might look at the industry. What does the industry normally do? Like in the case of polypinner, does the industry normally do for writers if there's some type of vague term? Now you can clarify those types of things, but the specific written terms that are clear and there's no, disagreement or not disagreement, but there's no vagueness to it. There's a clear understanding.
So could we also say in the misunderstanding or the terms that are not clear in that contract that there could be applicable provisions within that the contract or how they lay everything out?
What was the first part of your question, Ladaria?
With regard to the understanding of the contract, you just mentioned different scenarios where the wording is vague or something is not clear.
Right.
My question was, in that case, would it be considered okay to have applicable provisions that allow the information or the contract to be solidified as understood by both parties?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. In that case, then you could show, like, if there's some type of writing or email communication, or
Okay.
if there's a standard in the industry, if there have been prior dealings between the parties, like say they have prior dealings and they've, worked together and, and so you might look at that to show or to interpret those terms that are not really clear.
Understood.
Do that. So that would be different from clear terms that are in the contract that you didn't put in. Like, for example, I want to own everything that you reject.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's
Okay.
pretty straightforward,
Okay.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, so anyway, that's the parole evidence rule, and when it doesn't apply. Because you can bring in that information if it's vague or there's no real understanding of those terms.
Okay.
And what I did want to do is on the polypinner contract, since it's a contract class, if you look at the contract, a lot of this contract, there is the standard introductory paragraph that tells you what the agreement is, tell you who the parties are, where they're located. That's pretty standard in contracts. And then you have a term, and then paragraphs 8 and 11 through 15. I don't know if you guys have it with you. Anyway, when you look at, and I'll upload the PowerPoints for you. But when you look at the polypinner employment contract, there are a lot of standard contract terms, or clauses, I should say, that you find in a number of contracts. For example, number 8, clause 8 says that if any portion of this contract is deemed invalid or unenforceable, then the remaining part of the contract will stand. That's pretty standard language. So say, there's a 20-paragraph contract and paragraph 5 is not valid, or the court strikes it for somewhat other reason. Then the remaining contract will stand, as opposed to the whole contract being invalid. It's just saying, okay, we're going to strike out paragraph 5, and then the rest of the contract will move forward. So that's kind of a standard clause in contract. And then clauses 11 through 15, when you get a chance to look at it, one of them is how you modify the agreement. Most agreements say, if you're going to modify this agreement, it must be in writing, signed by both parties. And then the choice of law, like say there's a breach of the contract. Where are you going to sue? If somebody's in New York and the other person is in California, where would you sue? And so most contracts will have some term that says, any suits will sue in blah, blah, blah state. And this is the law we're going to apply. We're going to apply the state of that law. So that's pretty standard. And then that the agreement, this is the entire and complete agreement of the parties. That brings in that parole evidence rule. Okay, everything in this writing is our complete agreement. So if you don't have it in there, then you can't come in later under the parole evidence rule and say, oh, no, this was a part of the contract. And so that's a kind of a standard term. And then another one would be like indemnification, like if you have to pay out, who's going to pay, and different things like that, like notices. Who, should notices be in writing? What are the addresses of the parties? Where do you send notice to? How many days you have to give a party to give them notice? So those are standard contract terms and language. They vary, but most contracts will have some type of language like that. And so I wanted you guys to look at that employment contract in terms of that standard language. Any questions about that? Okay, and then the other thing is, the person who drafts the contract, typically that contract favors them, right? Polly Penner was probably sent a standard writer's contract from the studios. And so I'm sure, as you can see, it had a lot of stuff in it that favored Dysnomia and not Polly Penner, not the writer, whoever the writer would be. So it would favor that party. It's just like if you were writing a contract, you would probably write it to your benefit, right? And so a lot of times you have to look at that. That's why you need to read written contracts. That's why you need to have your attorney look at it if it's something that important, and then change those things if it's not favorable to you. And some of that depends on your bargaining power. You have someone who's an independent writer versus some big studio.
Mm-hmm.
So she didn't have a whole lot of negotiating power. She wanted a job, right?
Uh-huh.
And when you want a job, a lot of times you're not nitpicking on stuff like that. You're like, okay, let's sign this so I can, get to work and start getting a paycheck. And so just think of that in terms of different types of contracts. And yes, they typically favor the party who drafts.
Oh yeah, I remember signing one of those type of contracts.
Yep.
Yeah,
Okay.
I remember when I went in the military, I signed one of those contracts.
So you signed your life away, didn't you?
Yeah. Took the word right out of my mouth.
It was about an enlistment bonus, because I went in during the time when it was 3 years,
Mm-hmm.
3 years. But if I would have enlisted for 12 more months, which would have been 4 years, I would have got a $10,000 bonus.
Okay.
And then and when we was graduating from AIT, and everybody was going and picking up bonuses, and I was like, "Where's my bonus?" They said, "No, was it in your contract?" No.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So did you not know about that bonus, or you just hadn't worked the additional or given
No,
them
I didn't know about it.
12 months?
I didn't know about it at all.
Oh, okay. Right.
But, I got 12 months shorter enlistment, though.
Okay. So that might have been a condition of them paying you that bonus, right? Which is,
well, that's the way it was explained to me, because of I only signed a 3-year contract, that I didn't get the bonus. And if I would have, then they would have told me about it. But it was kind of crazy. But I wanted.
I'm sure they just needed your body to enlist, and they needed you. And thank you for your service.
Welcome to the military.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so let's move on for contract performance and excuse. That's tonight's lesson for Unit 5. So by the end of this unit, you should be able to answer the following questions. What are the 7 post-contractual happenings that excuse further performance? How do express conditions affect performance under the contract? That's probably what you were dealing with, Johnny. What happens when a contracting party dies and when it is impossible to perform under the contract? Okay, so when will performance of the deal be excused? So you have a deal, but it's no breach, okay? We're not talking about a breach of contract.
I'm looking for my notes.
Excuse is not a breach of contract. For example, them not giving you that signing bonus, okay?
Mm-hmm.
You didn't meet the excuse requirements or the conditions, so it's an excuse for them giving you that money as opposed to them breaching the contract with you. You look at it.
I'm sorry. Would the impossibility of performance be one of those excuses?
Yes, and we'll get to that.
Okay.
Yeah, we will get to that. If it's impossible to perform, then there's no breach. The parties are excused from performance. Hi, Jack.
Hi.
Okay, So the party is excused from performance, and it's based on those 7 post-contract happenings. So you have a contract, but things happen. What are those things that will affect whether or not you're breaching the contract or whether or not you are excused from performing under the contract? And that is if the other party's total non-performance. The other party just does not perform, so why should you? Right? They just don't perform. So you're excused from performing under the contract. Clearly, they don't want the contract to go forward, and so you're excused from performance in that case if the other party just does not do what they're supposed to do.
Not holding up their end of the deal.
Right, exactly. And then another one is the other party says he is not going to perform, okay? This is known as anticipatory repudiation. It must be material to the contract. It is a form of breach of contract, and it requires an unequivocal indication of intention not to perform. If the party says, hey, I'm not sending you any money for that car, then you don't have to deliver that car if you had a contract with that person to sell your car to them. If they say, I'm not giving you anything, then guess what you don't have to do? Then you don't have to sell that car or deliver that car, right? So, you know, they told you unequivocally that they are not going to perform. So
what does it mean by?
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. What does it mean by must be material?
Material meaning that it has to be something related to or goes to the heart of the contract. For example, that car. Okay. If they say I'm not going to pay you, that the whole contract is for purchasing the car, right? But if they say, you know, if the other party says, well, I'm not going to wash the car before I give it to you or sell it to you, that's not material.
That's services.
Right. You're not, you know, just because they don't wash the car before they sell it to you, you're still going to get the car. Right? So them promising you and saying, I'm not going to wash the car, that's not material. It doesn't go to the heart of what the contract is about. The contract is to sell the car.
I found Professor, I found the case that the book mentioned, that employment case, very interesting because sometimes it was germane to employment, and sometimes in hard economic times, an organization may go through a hiring freeze or something, and a job is in process, and subsequently an offer is made, but then you have to rescind that offer. I just found it very significant that in rescinding that particular offer based on that case, you had better make sure that you then don't provide that offer, that opportunity to someone else.
Right. Exactly.
That I found that as from an employment standpoint, I found that very interesting to correlate it to this particular topic, because sometimes companies do have to rescind contracts. So,
well, that's true, because I had that happen to me actually when I first got out of my undergrad, and I was working for Xerox, telling my age. And so I was working there as a temp, me and another girl. Both of us had just been hired through the temp agency. And so we were promised a permanent job with them. And so she got hired because her agency worked really hard to get her hired. But right after that, they had a hiring freeze. They hired nobody. And so the circumstances changed when they got to me.
Right.
And it wasn't just me, it was everybody. They didn't hire anybody for a whole year.
Right.
But she just got in,
yes,
before those circumstances changed. So I couldn't go in and force them then to say, well, you better hire me. You said you were going to hire me.
Right.
The circumstances changed and they didn't make an offer to anybody. Nobody was hired.
Well, we've had situations where the offer was made, but business necessity dictated that that job wasn't as valuable at that time.
Yeah.
And so we had to rescind. And so I guess it really drove home that if you're going to rescind an offer, you better make sure that when you do offer again on that job, if it's a short time frame, you better make sure that you can justify it based on this case, because you can get sued.
Well, yeah, you can.
Yeah.
You can. Is there an excuse for the performance, or is there a breach?
Right.
So it sounds like, it can be either one depending on the circumstances, and that's the issue. Were they excused from performance because their circumstances changed to a degree that they weren't able to, or did they just change their mind and they used it as an excuse?
Right.
But really it was a breach because they wanted to go in a different direction, but they had already made an offer to someone.
Absolutely.
Right? So it really is fact specific. I mean, most contract cases, most legal cases are fact specific. It depends on the facts of that particular case to find out if that party is excused from performing, or they actually breached and then they owe the other party something based on that breach of contract. Okay, so let's move on. So if a third way to have an excuse from performance is if you have reasonable grounds for insecurity. It's not enough for anticipatory repudiation, but you're not sure of the other party's intention to perform. Okay, for some reason, you're not quite sure, you're insecure about their performance, right? It's like if you hear in the news that, say you just got hired for Sears Company, and then you hear in the news that Sears is going out of business.
Yes.
Right? You're kind of insecure about that, that offer they made to you if you just got hired, right?
Right.
And so you might want to ask for some type of assurance that they are going to perform. And then if we're dealing with the sale of goods under the UCC, then you can demand the assurance of performance in writing. You can suspend your performance until you receive that adequate assurance, and then you can just stop performing if you don't get adequate assurance. Right?
So the demand part of that, would that be if you bought a car and you demanded it was in working condition?
That I'm not sure, because depending on, it should have been in working condition. I don't know the terms of it. That's kind of general.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be a little more general. So, that sounds like a breach if you were purchasing a car. Wouldn't be an excuse to performance. It would be excuse to your performance if you purchased that car and then it didn't run and you thought it was gonna run. They're in breach. They've breached the contract, but you have an excuse from performing. That meaning you have an excuse from paying them for a car that didn't work. Make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So let's move on. So you can demand, suspend, or stop performance if it's under the UCC. We're talking about the sale of goods. And then if there's improper performance by the other party, under the common law, a party, or case law, when we say common law, it's typically case law. A party is excused from performance if there is a material breach. That, again, when we're talking about material, it goes to the heart of the matter. For example, if you, back to our car example, if that party sells that car to another person, but they have another car available, that's material because you entered into a contract with them for a specific car. When you buy a car, it's for a specific car, not just a car, if you have a car. And so that's material, right? So you would be excused from performing if there was a material breach under the common law. But under the UCC, with respect to goods, there is called a perfect tender rule, meaning that they have to give you exactly what you asked for. And if the goods fail in any respect, then the buyer has the right to reject. So say you buy, 20 pallets of something, of widgets, and then they deliver it and it's only 10 pallets. Then you can reject it and say, no, I ordered 20 pallets from you. I don't want the 10. Okay, and then there's an exception under the UCC if you give the other party the right to cure. So if you say, hey, you know, you call them and say, it's only 10 pallets. You know, I asked for 20. What's going on? And they say, oh, you know, we had a truck breakdown or something and they can only deliver 10. We're delivering the other 10 tomorrow. You give them the right to cure. And then if they don't deliver them tomorrow, you're waiting another month, 2 weeks, a week. They don't deliver, then you can just reject all of those goods. Okay, under the UCC. It has to be the same thing that you've requested or purchased. You have to get the same thing. If not, then you can reject it. And so then our second question is, how do express conditions affect performance under the contract? Something that's in the writing that says, if you do this, then I have the obligation to do whatever that may be. So there's a non-occurrence of an express condition. Must be written in the contract, and it excuses performance if the condition is not met. For example, I will sell you my car for $5,000 if you can get financed by the bank. If you don't get financing from the bank, then the other party is excused from performance. Right? It's written in the contract. The contract says, I will sell you my car for the $5,000 if you can get finance from the bank. That's pretty much an express condition, because if you can't get finance from the bank, you probably can't purchase that car. Right? And so then they don't have to give you that car. They're excused from selling you their car if you can't get that financing. So that's how express conditions work. So what happens when a contracting party dies and when it is impossible to perform under the contract? You think that you must perform if they die?
Well, they go after the estate.
Right. That's my next slide. Okay. So, did I miss a slide? Let me go back. Yeah. Yes, so they will go after the estate. I think it's on another slide. I've skipped it, or it's out of order. Okay, so impossibility or impracticability. Okay, and it involves occurrences after the contract that were not anticipated by the parties. So you have a contract for something, and then something happens after that, and it's, you know, no longer possible or practicable for you to perform under the contract, then you would both be excused from your performance. So under the common law, which is case law, it applies when the subject matter of the contract is damaged or destroyed. So I agreed to sell you my car for such and such amount of money, and, you know, over in the night, some drunk person, you know, just completely destroys the car, right? You can't make that person buy that destroyed car. So it's been damaged and destroyed, and so you would be excused from performing. Okay, and under the UCC, how it's different, it applies when the identified goods have been damaged or destroyed. Okay, those goods have to be identified for you. So say you're ordering, you know, 20 widgets, and those widgets are earmarked for ABC Company, and they've been identified for ABC Company. If those goods are destroyed or damaged, then there's no performance. You're excused from performing. However, if your agreement is for 20 widgets and they have thousands of widgets and they haven't been identified, then they can just go get 20 widgets and give to you. They haven't been identified. And so there would not be an excuse for performance in that case. It's only when they've been identified and earmarked for ABC Company, then there's an excuse if those goods are actually damaged or destroyed. Another way is the death of the contracting party does not excuse performance. That's what we're talking about. You can recover from a party's estate, for example, the repayment of a loan. When you die, your family has to pay those loans that you may have. And so there is an exception, and that is when the performance can only be performed by that particular party. An example of that would be, say you know, Michelle and Barack Obama just had their portraits painted. And so say you contract with that guy who painted the pictures to paint your portrait. Okay, if God forbid something happens to him and they die, then in that case there would be, you know, the death would excuse performance because it's for a specific party. Only that person could do that. Versus if there's a supervening law or regulation which affects the legality of the contract, then you may not be able to perform. You are excused from performance. For example, in California, marijuana is legal in California. However, if the federal government says marijuana cannot be legal anymore, then California's law has to change because federal law supersedes California's law, right? And so in that case, then if there's a contract based on selling marijuana, then you are excused from performance, okay? Because the law or regulation has affected the actual contract. And then, but parties can include in terms in contract excuses to performance or clauses that require performance no matter what happens. Okay, that's a hell or high water. We don't care what happens, you're still gonna perform. That does not apply when there's some type of law or regulation making the subject of that contract illegal. That would govern. And then we talked about the supervening law or regulation which affects the legality of the contract. However, parties can, however, include terms in contract, excuses to performance, and then clauses that require performance no matter what happens. That's hell or high water. So I guess if there is a storm affecting your contract, then you still would perform if it says, no matter what, I don't care if a storm happens, you still have to perform. Typically, those are hard to enforce in court because typically when it comes to a contract, if there's a breach of any type, the court will try to give a remedy based on what the parties contracted for. And so if that thing that they've contracted for is no longer available or destroyed in any type of way, the courts are less likely to enforce that contract. But once again, it's fact specific. Frustration of purpose. That is another way to excuse performance. We're talking about not a breach. Just you don't have to perform. You're excused from performance based on frustration of purpose. This applies when the mutually understand purpose of the contract is no longer valid. For example, and I think this example is in your book, if you're renting an apartment to view a parade to a party and the parade is canceled, okay, there's no longer a reason for the contract. Neither party really, you know, you might want the money, but if there's no parade, the person's not coming, you can't make them perform under that contract. Because you mutually understood that the purpose of that contract was for that party to have a good view of the parade. And if it's canceled, then there's no reason for it. So you're both excused from performance in that case. Any questions? We said a lot in this time. But most of it is in the book. It's just reinforcing what is in the book. I will upload my PowerPoints by the end of the week so you can review them if you need them. But if you have questions about anything.
Kind of off topic though, because it's, I don't know, because I think we're learning like common law, right? But I see these UCC codes and stuff, and I know like sometimes I hear that being said that you violated certain statutes, but you know you didn't violate a law. and stuff. So I mean, how would you know how to navigate yourself in a court? If they're using statutes and not common law.
Okay, so
Does that make sense?
yes, okay, so there's either a violation of a statute, and if there is no statute, there may be case law to support whatever the action is about. Whether it's a breach of contract, or whether it's some type of personal injury, or whether or not it's some type of business dealing, whatever it may be. There may be a statute that governs whatever your dispute is over, or there may just be case law, okay, that the court will rely on. You will know that if you're sued by someone, they will put in the statute or the principle that you are violating. So the complaint would say that the basis for that person having some type of dispute or cause of action against you. Most of the time, if there's a statute or a law, statute is a law or a rule, there is case law to interpret that statute, especially if it's been around for a long time. So that's how the case law works. The case law will say, it will elaborate on the meaning of what that statute says.
Okay.
Right?
So it's sort of like an updated version of
right, because there may be terms in that statute that are not defined, or that are that are unclear. For example, negligence. There may be a statute based on negligence, right? So you sue somebody for negligence. Well, what is negligent? Okay, is me accidentally doing something negligent, or is my action something that I do, like, for example, if I leave the file cabinet open and you don't see it, and you turn around and trip and fall and break your ankle, right? Okay, is that enough for you to sue me for negligence and recover? The way you know that is you look at case law, and case law will say, in the cases of someone doing that type of action, what I did, it is not enough to sue that person for negligence. It's not negligence. It might be negligence, but it might not be enough for you to recover under the law.
Okay.
So that's what the case law does. It further defines what that term negligence means. So that's what we do. As a lawyer, that's what I do. We research case laws. We see how the law has been applied to facts that are similar to ours, to see if our client can or cannot recover.
So does that mean that the case law sets the precedent for the understanding of that? Okay.
Yes, absolutely. That is what it is. It's precedential, and it's called stare decisis. That means that the courts have to follow the case law and the law before it. Okay, so if there is a case in my jurisdiction that says, if you leave a drawer open and your employee falls and injures themselves, you are guilty of negligence. Okay, if a case says that, and that employee sues me, then then the court has to follow that previous case that says that it is negligent. So I could be liable for my negligence in doing that. Gotcha. Now, if it's unclear, you might have to argue your client's position, but there are several cases. Most of the time there are cases, unless it's something very new, then there may not be as much case law out there. And then the court will look at principles from similar types of cases, or principle from similar laws to apply to your case, if there isn't any case law. Or they'll look at the legislative history. They look at all types of things to show the precedent or what they should follow in that case. But they work hand in hand. basically.
Okay.
And then the UCC is just for the sale of goods. That's the only time that applies if you're selling goods. If you're
Okay.
services, then the UCC would not apply. That would probably be under the common law.
Okay.
And the common law basically is judge-made rules. So it's based on case law.
Wow.
That was a lot to take in.
That's why it's my first year law students in legal research and writing. That is a principle you must understand.
Okay.
That's why we research cases. That's why when you go to court and they have cases, you know, you have to tell the court, look, all these cases said this. So because all these cases said this, now you need to follow what they say and also allow my client to recover if they are in a similar circumstance.
Interesting.
And that's precedent, or stare decisis is what they call it. That's the Latin word for it. So it allows you to predict what the court is likely to do, and to not, it's about fairness, right? If I'm in a similar position as someone else, then I should be treated similarly, right? It shouldn't change just because I'm a different person. And so that's pretty much what the law is all about and what the judges follow. And judges don't like to be overturned, and so they usually follow the law. We have some rogue judges, especially in the Ninth Circuit in California where I live, but and they get overturned all the time because they go off on these tangents, right? But you know, most judges don't like to be overturned, and so they follow the law before them. Make sense?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Good information.
So what I'm gonna do is definitely check with them on the final. If it's not on Samuel, it'll probably be on Jacob and Rachel.
Leah.
And Leah. Yes, that hold the contract for Jacob to work for Laban. Yes, and so I'm hoping to change it to that, but if not, it will be on Samuel and Saul.
And when is the final due?
The 7th week, I think it's the Saturday.
Actually, it
Saturday.
says Thursday.
Saturday? I
It
thought,
says the
yeah,
Thursday.
If it says Thursday, that's when it's due. Whatever it says in the,
Because the syllabus is different from the last one, so.
you need to look online. I don't have a syllabus, so I don't know where you're getting a syllabus from.
The syllabus is online. It's on the top of all the headings.
on the portal.
I didn't put it up there.
Wow.
It's not a syllabus, but it tells us, you know, the dates that are due, the discussion, the meeting,
It calls itself a syllabus.
right?
Well, you know what? What I did was I submitted everything to Technico, and they populated the course. And so because of that, I'm not sure what it says, because what I go by is what is in the portal when I click on. So you should go by that. When you go in the portal and you click on whatever you need to click on for that particular week, that's what I go by. I'll look at the syllabus because it might be wrong.
It's on the portal. But it's 2 weeks from today, right? It's on the 1st of March.
Say that again.
Is it 2 weeks from today, the 1st of March?
Yes. Any other questions before we end our meeting today?
I have a quick question regarding the due date. If we turn it in early, earlier than the actual due date, is there a penalty for that, or?
No.
Okay.
I don't penalize you.
Okay.
Yeah. And if you miss something and you want to do it, you have to email me and let me know. And then I will make arrangements with you to get it done, because I would rather you do it and learn what you need to learn than to just not do it and get a 0. Okay, so that's up to you, but you have to communicate that to me. Otherwise, I go by what's submitted.
Understood.
So you need to communicate with me, say, you know, you missed number 2 because you were just busy that week and you couldn't make it. A media posting or discussion post, let me know and I'll make arrangements with you. But you will have a strict deadline to get that in. I usually will let you know, hey, you got to get this in by such and such date.
Okay, and there's only one paper due because it says also paper and PowerPoint.
Yeah, before. Okay,
And one says Tuesday and one says Thursday.
Thing. Okay, before there was a PowerPoint presentation and a paper. Okay, it's just an essay paper.
Okay.
You don't have to do a PowerPoint presentation. It is just an essay. I thought I had changed that, but it may be different in the syllabus you have versus the class, because I updated the class from last time. That was kind of a duplicate to have the paper and to have them presented. And a lot of people were complaining about the live session and how many live sessions for an online class. And so I just took that away. You don't have to do a PowerPoint presentation. You just need to do an essay to answer all of those questions and submit it to me by the deadline.
Great.
Oh, I bet you that's what it was. Is we used to present them on Thursday and have the papers
In
by
an
Saturday.
APA format.
Yeah, so I mean, typically that's what you did before, but you know, I was trying to reduce the number of live recordings because a lot of people could not make it. And so, I mean, I'm happy to be here for your presentation if you want it. Other than that, you can just, you know, send me the paper by the deadline and I'll grade it.
We'll send the paper.
Sounds good.
That's right.
Thank you.
Yeah, it looks like, wasn't there a PowerPoint that you had for the rules of that also? For that, for the final paper? Because I was looking at it and I thought you had a PowerPoint with it also to guide the paper itself, and I'm not seeing that anymore.
Oh, I did delete it. No, that was my professor notes, but that was that was just to let you know my thoughts and what I was looking for.
Oh,
for
okay.
Your answer. And so you should not have that. Because I don't want you to copy from that. I want your own thoughts. And so I did delete a paper today, and it was that, if that's what you're talking about.
Oh.
Yeah, because it had some guidance of how to structure the paper.
Oh, so it's deleted? Okay. I was going to print it. Okay.
I was too.
It.
Gosh, I was going to print it. Okay.
It
It had good points. It had very good points, though, and it kind of give you a clear understanding of what you're expecting from the paper.
Exactly.
Yeah, so if you have read it, then you have an idea, right? If you've read it. And so.
Just no visual reference.
But it was really everything that I was looking for. And so I want your own thoughts because that's the way you learn, by doing.
I just like the way it created a structure to kind of make sure you got all the points that you were supposed to
Who's
get.
talking?
Yvonne.
Okay. All righty. Well, I will put structure. I think if you answer the questions, I think on the beginning there is structure to tell you how to answer it. But like I said, email me. I might not get it right away, but email me and I will try my best to respond to you.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you.
Very
Yes.
good. You guys
Perfect.
have a wonderful and blessed rest of your weekend.
Thank you.
As well.
I enjoyed having you in class, and hopefully you've learned something and will continue to learn something. I urge you to look at the polypinner contract in terms of not the parole evidence rule, but just as a contract. And also to go online and look at, you can search anything in Google, you know, for contracts. And so there's simple contracts, they're detailed contracts. Look at a simple contract and then look at a detailed contract and you'll see the difference, but there is a lot of some of the same contract type of clauses in those contracts as well. Usually they're at the end. The standard contract terms are usually found at the end of the contract, but look at it and just see the difference, and hopefully that will be beneficial to you.
You know, is there a page count with this this week 7 project?
I said 6 pages.
Okay, I'm just reading here.
Some of the questions you can answer in half a page to a page, and then some of them don't. There may not be a lot on it.
Okay.
So some would be a little more detailed than others. I mean, if it's 7 pages or 8 pages, I'm not going to be mad at you, but please don't give me a 10-page paper. I had a student give me for a final a 50-page paper.
Wow.
That's too much.
Wow.
A dissertation.
and it did not recall that. Most of the other students' pages were probably 10 pages, and I got a 50-page paper, and I just, so, I mean, yeah. Get close to 6 if you're wordy.
So that was a detailed
I'm not
contract
wordy
versus
person.
a standard contract.
Yeah, he had examples and pictures from the internet and stuff, and it's like, I didn't ask for all of that. I mean, that was bad. You know,
You didn't say not
I could
to.
have given him an F, I would have. But I mean, he was good. What he wrote was good. But you know, I wanted to give him an F just on GP, like not to do that.
The professor
Very well.
specifically say not to do that.
Don't do that.
Say not to do that.
From now on, I do. I tell them because it doesn't help you to, you know, give me all this extra stuff. I mean, he did a good job. He was a smart student, but you know, you don't want to make the instructor mad when they're grading your paper.
Exactly.
That you don't want to do.
50 pages. Wow.
I had to call the registrar on that one and ask them if I could just fail them. Do that. So
That's
anyway,
great.
for thought for you. Okay,
Nice way to end the evening.
How to fail a class.
Yes. Okay, good
It
people.
wasn't what you wanted. You could have refused acceptance and had him redo it, right? The right to cure.
I guess so.
Interesting.
Oh, goodness.
Wow.
Okay. With that said, I am signing off.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Have a good evening.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank
Have a good one. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye.